This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Welcome to episode 188 of a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda, and today's sponsor is Private Internet Access. You can find out more about Private Internet Access by going to geekleader.com/VPN. So what do I talk about Private Internet Access? Well, Private Internet Access has a service of global VPNs that allow you to connect many different devices to their VPN, which will mask where you're coming from on the internet. So why do you say you want to do that? I'm not a criminal. I don't want to do that. But it adds a layer of protection. So if you are traveling and you want to connect somewhere, you're at the mercy of the Wi-Fi of wherever you're located. If you're going to connect, maybe you're on vacation or you're traveling for holidays, you're at a family's house, you can protect where you're coming from by using Private Internet Access. You can also test out the internet from different places. So many of us have jobs where we're building websites, we're developing software, or we want to test out bandwidth of what it's like to connect from, let's say, California or from the UK or from Brazil. You can do all that with Private Internet Access, and you can get a discount today by going to geekleader.com/VPN. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I've got Jon Kazarian. He is the founder and CEO of Accelevents, one-stop shop. Kazarian. All right, here we go again. Take who knows how many. All right, Geek Leaders. Today on the show, I've got Jon Kazarian. He is the founder and CEO of Accelevents, one-stop shop for organizers who want to create a unique and engaging virtual experience for their audience. And we're going to talk a lot about things that have changed with COVID and how virtual events work and how they got started with this company. So with all that being said, Jon, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So if you don't mind telling the audience just a little bit about kind of your past and how you got to where you are and what you guys are doing today, just to lay some context for the rest of our conversation.
Definitely. So it's this is sort of the third phase or third iteration of Accelevents. But the company started back in 2015. I had a cousin who was diagnosed with cancer at the age of 17, and I wanted to do something for her. So went and rented out the aquarium here in Boston and held a fundraiser. Ended up getting about 840 people to that first event, which is great, but we couldn't find any affordable solutions to facilitate our auction and raffle. So ended up working with a friend to build out this, frankly, lightweight solution based on Twilio, and it just worked. And we got great feedback from the organization that we put the event on for and from the attendees, and decided that we could take that and offer that to more organizations or volunteers, frankly, like ourselves, at a more affordable price. So did that for a little bit, kind of nights and weekends project, had another job. And after about 18 months of doing that, the feedback that we started to get from these organizations was that they wanted a more full stack solution. So incorporating payment processing and full service ticketing as well. So we started developing that. And as we continued to build that, we started to focus more heavily on for-profits events. So conferences, festivals, concerts, trade shows, and the like. And that persisted for a couple of years. Things were looking great. We were growing at, call it normal growth rates. And then February and March of 2020 came, and our revenue basically started decreasing, then went to zero, and then was essentially negative because we were refunding transaction fees. And we looked at where we were and said, all right, we're either going to buckle down on the fundraising tools we have, or we're going to pivot into virtual. And that's what we did. And as a result of that, we've grown tremendously. We've essentially quadrupled our 2019 revenue in the month of October alone. And
Wow.
And we've grown our headcount to 76 people.
Wow, that's incredible. So that was a good decision to pivot.
Seems to be the case.
So tell me about that process. Like, what was the mindset? I'm sure that was a tough conversation to have with the rest of your team to make that decision to pivot. And how do you go about figuring out what the requirements are for your new product?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that we had going for us was that from day one, we were always customer obsessed. We use, shout out to Intercom, frankly, for their chat tools. And, to a large extent, we built the business on the way that we communicate with people in real time through chat. And from that, we've just learned so much about how events operate and how people think about the value they're getting out of events. And it put us in a really good position to think holistically about what's the best experience we can create for attendees and for organizers who are hosting virtual events. So we started thinking about the value that people derive from events. And from there, we started thinking about how can we provide those experiences virtually, and then started to think about, okay, what's the tech that we need to implement to do that?
So were you seeing like your customers kind of also struggling? Because I know like there were a couple of events that I was supposed to speak at that kind of got pulled away right at the last minute and canceled. And some events went virtual, but a lot of them didn't. They just kind of stopped. Did you see that happening? And what was your process of going out to those existing customers that were struggling and trying to help them along, maybe give them beta access to things, or what was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, that was a big part of what we did. If you think back to that, the spring, there was so much uncertainty. There's a lot of organizations that kind of kicked the can down the road and said, okay, we'll do the event in 6 weeks. And 6 weeks later, things were worse. So we certainly did put the platform in the hands of customers and allow them to beta it. But as soon as we positioned our virtual event offering, the inbound demand it was ridiculous. So we grew our customer base significantly as well.
Yeah, I imagine there's a lot of events out there where people were trying to figure out how to do it and were able to find a product like yours and just jump into it. So, what is the process like? Let's say I wanted to start a Geek Leader conference for technical CIOs and CTOs and people to come in and learn and share. What would be the process of me onboarding and starting something like this?
Yeah, definitely. And we've seen a lot of tech events on the platform. It's as simple as coming to the website and clicking the Get Started button. The way that our platform is designed, we don't have to be involved at any step in the process. Our event organizers can create the entire event on their own. They have full control over the platform from within our admin portal.
Okay, so I would just set up and answer like a list of questions, figure out exactly when I wanted it, who the attendees would be, generate a link or whatever to send out, and
Yeah, so I think even backing up a step, there's I think there's a little bit of a misconception around the difference between a virtual event and, say, a webinar.
yeah.
And webinar is often a single activity, a single stream. Maybe there's a couple of different people that are speaking, like a panel, or even different people getting rotated in, but that's kind of the extent of the interaction. The world of virtual events is much more similar to that of what we know from in-person conferences and trade shows. It's those keynote sessions, but also having concurrent breakout sessions, different types of workshops, different types of networking opportunities, areas for people to interact with each other, virtual networking lounges, and also having that virtual trade show or exhibit floor where you can interact with the sponsors and exhibitors from the event. So there's a lot more components to it. And in thinking about developing one of those events or hosting one of those events, yeah, you'll go into the platform and you'll answer some questions that kind of get the basics started. But then you start to think about, okay, well, you're selling sponsorships and you're going to add those exhibitors or sponsors in, and you're going to invite your speakers and list out the agenda for the conference. So it's it's as vast as you want to make it. The average event on the platform is a 2-day event. Some events are full weeks. Some of them are once a week for 4 weeks. It's kind of runs a gamut. We've seen a lot of creativity in the way that people are structuring these events, and a lot of creativity in the extent at which they're sort of defining their event.
So one of the thing I've attended a couple of virtual events, and some of them have been 2-day events, and I think that's the longest actually that I've attended. I attended a 1-day CIO summit and a couple of 2-day events. And for me, I was surprised on how much it felt actually like going to a conference. Because I could go into a session and I could drop out of that session and I could hit the visit with the vendors and check out some products that I was interested in and chat with those folks. And it really did feel like I was coming in and coming out of sessions. How does that interaction happen, like with the speakers? So if I'm a speaker, which I've never spoken at a virtual event, but what would that be like for me?
Yeah, it's really straightforward for the speakers as well. Speakers would join the event just the same way that you did as an attendee. They would just have another area that they can click into and start their talk from there. And then their attendees will join and they'll interact, do polling, Q&A, monitor the chat throughout, share screen, share videos, whatever they need to do engage and communicate with their audience.
So do you see virtual events being like kind of the new standard going forward, or do you see like maybe after this vaccine comes and gets more mainstream, it becomes more of a hybrid type thing where people will have a choice? Because I like the idea of attending sometimes to get that one-on-one reaction interaction, but I also love the ability to be able to not have to travel, and be able to attend and get the benefits of learning and also networking without having to get on an airplane or something.
Yeah, absolutely. I started the company around a large scale event that I was hosting myself. I love in-person events. I really
Mhm.
do. But there are so many benefits to virtual that um, it's gonna be a mix going forward, and it's more thinking about event programming going forward. One thing that we're seeing, especially with the corporate clients that we work with, is that they're thinking about their 2021 event calendar almost bifurcated in that there's the concept of hybrid and in-person events in one category, and then the other side is just the purely virtual events that are so much cheaper to facilitate. They have so much wider of a reach, and they're a great way to deepen relationships with your customer base without a really big ask from those customers. So in short, going forward, the hybrid experience, it's on the way, it's close, and hopefully we're with the vaccine getting rolled out very shortly, we're going to be very close to seeing a large scale of those hybrid events. But virtual is it's here to stay, and they're complements to one another.
Yeah, yeah. There was an event that I've gone to before in person. Is in Atlanta, called Hackers Halted, and they went to a virtual format for this year. And basically, they refunded everybody's money and said it's going to be free because our sponsors will cover it now that we don't have to get a hotel and a convention center. We'll make it a free event, and it worked out really well. I mean, was able to chat with a couple of vendors that I was interested in, set into the sessions, did it all in my office. It was great.
And and you also didn't have to take a couple of days, one day on either side of travel,
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, or pay for the travel.
or pay for the event itself. I mean, that's the thing with our platform as compared to in-person event. People are paying more to host an in-person event just for the coffee in the conference hall than it costs to host the platform or host the event virtually. And the sponsors are covering that. And frankly, the sponsors, the exhibitors, they're getting more value when you're hosting an in-person event. It is 300 people walk by your booth before you get a business card, if people even carry business cards today.
Yeah.
And with virtual, you get not only who stops by your booth, but what videos did they watch, what links did they click, what documents did they download, how much did they interact. Give them the opportunity to book a meeting right there in the platform, facilitate that meeting in the platform. It takes all of those barriers out of the way and makes it so much easier. And because of that, the sponsors, they generate more revenue as well, and they want to come back and they want to host more of these events.
Yeah, I think the analytics that you can provide are, so much greater than the analytics that are provided, in an in-person conference. I remember I was talking to a head of marketing at a company that I used to work at, and they wanted me to attend one of their events and be in the booth so I could, talk tech with the folks that showed up. And I was like, well, what's your average visit, time? How long are people there typically? They're like, well, I don't know. I don't know. Like they didn't have any of that data because people just walked up and they didn't, capture that. But I guess with your product, you can actually see how long someone's there, how long they watch the video. You would get a recording of the conversation that they had.
Exactly. And that's just talking about it from the exhibitor perspective. But if you think about it, imagine you're a software company and you're hosting a user conference. Now you have all that same insight and data on your existing customers or your prospects, and you can see, okay, well, maybe you rolled out this new feature last year, and one of your customers keeps checking out information related to that feature. Maybe that's an opportunity for an AE to go and reach out to that person and see if they're interested in buying.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fantastic. Also, we'll show you which customers you could potentially bring in to refine your requirements with. Which ones you would be willing to alpha and beta test products and such.
Yeah, absolutely. And going back to your question around speakers, we can see which speakers were actually keeping people's attention for the duration of
Mm.
the talk, and which ones we don't want to invite back next year.
Yeah, exactly. So, which is maybe one of the reasons why I've been a little bit nervous about actually speaking at one of these. I don't want to see all the
know
dropouts.
what? That that ups the game, right? I mean, if that's the way you're thinking about it, you're going to go in there. You're not going to hack it. You're going to put more thought into the content that you're creating, and that creates a better attendee experience.
Yeah,
And that's
so
what
that's
it's
one
all
of the
about.
thoughts. As a speaker, I like to feed off the energy of the crowd.
Yeah.
I can tell when something's landing or when it's missing, and if I need to go further or back off on something. How do you get that feedback when you're actually speaking virtually?
Yeah. So I mean, it's a little bit different. You're not reading faces as much,
Mhm.
but there are ways. There's emojis and other ways that the audience is interacting with the speakers and giving them that real time feedback, asking those questions. I mean, the counter is that when you're talking about an in-person event, people in the audience might have questions, but they can't interrupt and ask you those questions. This way, they can ask those questions in real time, and you can see their questions and know if you need to drill down in an area.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that I think you can get a lot more context out of it if you're reading the comments while you're presenting. If you're capable of doing that, which I kind of wonder if I can. I guess I could because I would just be changing my focus off of expressions and um, body language into more written language.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a context switch. I mean, we're all every day familiar with reading body language, but now instead of reading body language, you're actually reading what's in their head.
Yeah, I guess that would that would help a lot. So have you seen like people that are good in person also be good, on the virtual events?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's
Okay.
I mean, if people have that personality and they can show it, then it works just as well virtually as it does in person.
Mhm.
Especially at the
So
large scale events where it's a big room and the speakers got so many lights in their face they can't even see the audience anyway.
so what is some of the tech behind this? Because I imagine being a virtual event, you're capturing a lot of data. You've got a lot of data storage. You've got a lot of stuff going on, and
Yep.
being that most of my audience are tech leaders, we kind of geek out on some of this stuff. What are some of the tech behind this, and how did you guys go about building this product and putting it together?
Yeah. So on sort of day one of the pivot, the first question is what are we going to build versus what are we going to buy?
Mm.
And we're an AWS shop. Obviously, I'm sure a lot of your viewership is in the same boat. There's a lot of tools out there. We kind of started by evaluating what do we want to use as managed services from AWS, and what are scenarios where we want to go with the best of breed provider. So when it came to video, when it came to chat, those were areas where we decided that we could go to market faster by finding the right partner who's fully invested in building out API SDK version of their tool, and that meant that we're going to get the experience pulled together faster. We also made the conclusion right off the bat that we didn't want to be one of those you plug in your Zoom link type of
Yeah.
platforms. We wanted to make a much more integrated experience. And that really fed a lot of our building decisions from day one. And frankly, it led to a lot of the growth that we've had because it was that integrated experience. When you're inviting speakers, again, going back to the idea of speakers, you're not asking that speaker to pull together different pieces from different tools, log in here, log in there, download this. It's all just under one roof, and that really makes a more streamlined experience.
Yeah, I think that's something that I've noticed. I've been on a couple of those where they plugged in their Zoom things, and it really wasn't good. It wasn't a good experience. And I like what you guys have put together, where you have everything kind of under one roof, where you can go in and out of breakout sessions and into a room. I think that makes, like I said, it makes you feel like you're actually there, and you're able to. One of the things I've talked about on the show when I'm talking about attending conferences, is that track in between the tracks. That session where you're kind of in between sessions and you can chat with people and you have that experience
Mhm.
of meeting new people and growing your network. And I think being able to do that by being all under one umbrella is helpful.
Yeah, and having that time to bounce around and check out the exhibitors in between.
Yeah, absolutely. And and that's one of the big advantages of going to a conference. It's not just the things you learn in the sessions, it's the networking that takes place outside of those. Meeting with the exhibitors and all that good stuff. And finding a way to do that virtually is extremely important.
Absolutely.
So when you're looking at the decisions between build versus buy, are there any products that you've purchased? I don't want you to say any names or anything like that, but you're deciding now that maybe we should go ahead and take that and redo that in house so that we can refine it and customize it to something that will meet our customers' needs a little bit better.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So in terms of where we decided to buy versus build or integrate versus build, one of the areas was our chat tool. We're sticking with them. We've been very happy with them. The other piece of it is video. And video itself is kind of broken into two different realms. You've got the WebRTC, which is the sort of real-time communication, sub 500 millisecond latency. And then you've got, but the problem there is it's not scalable. Maybe 250 people max as viewers. But then when you want to broadcast that out to an event that has 10,000 people watching it or more, then you need to use a different solution. And we started by breaking out those two different components and thinking about how we wanted to handle it there. Facilitating WebRTC is a little bit easier in my opinion. And the other piece, the scaling it out to the HLS broadcast, that's another beast in itself. But we ended up actually picking 3 different tools, and we use different things in different ways, depending on which piece of the application it's for. And frankly, we've been pretty happy with the results.
Yeah, I imagine since this is kind of a new endeavor for I guess everybody, going through this event, switching from in-person to virtual events and such, you're having to learn a lot as you go. And have you had any like major failures that you would be willing to share and talk about things that you've learned from them?
Yeah, well, I mean, everybody has, right?
Yeah.
And part of that is that the hosting providers have.
Mm.
I mean, even this week, Google had an outage, and
Yep.
The day before Thanksgiving, AWS had an outage. That was a long outage. It was 11 hours, I believe. So that's been the biggest area of risk. For the most part, we're a single cloud tool for now. There's areas where we do rely on multi-cloud, but I would say that's been predominantly it. That is another risk also when you're relying on a vendor. So when you are relying on a vendor, you do lose a little bit of control over how much uptime you can impact and what you can do when there is an outage. But then again, if that goes back to the hosting provider, there's limited impact that we can make in real time anyway.
Yeah, I go back to a story when the first time our company we moved to Office 365. It was like the very first week we moved there. Microsoft had a huge Exchange outage or Outlook outage, so email was down for like 6 hours one day. It was like the week we moved to it, and our CEO is like, "Well, why can't you fix it?" Like, well, it's not in our hands anymore. We made that decision, and now we're kind of stuck.
No, I hear you. I mean, it's something like email. Yeah, it's bad when you can't send an email for 6 hours, but when it's something like an event, you can't just follow up after. Everything has to be perfect during that experience.
Mm-hmm.
People spend months boiling up to this period that could only be a couple of hours. And for that reason, uptime, when we think about product, uptime is number one. It has to be. You're bringing a whole bunch of people together at a point in time, and at the end of the day, that is what matters most, and that is where we focus quite a bit of our time.
Yeah, I imagine it's kind of like a wedding. You only get one shot, so
Exactly.
you got to make it happen, make it count, and get there going. So if there is an issue like that where like AWS is down or something like that, do you guys have options, or what do you do in something like that?
Yeah, I mean, we do have a lot of fallover built into the platform, so it does mitigate much of the risk there. I mean, our uptime is, I think, 99.995%, which is, I mean,
Yeah, that's wicked good. That's really good.
So it just, it's an area that we take very seriously. Knock on wood, there's always the possibility of issues, but being in the industry we're in, it has to be number one.
Mm-hmm. So whenever I'm attending these events and hopefully potentially speaking at one, I think the next time I get asked, I'll go ahead and bite the bullet and give it a try and see how it goes. Because it's one of those things that I need to do it. And I'll probably end up spending way more time than normal preparing just to make sure that it goes off well, because I imagine these are recorded and people can watch them later. Is that the way you guys do it?
Absolutely, and that's a big aspect, a big part of the win with virtual and soon to be with hybrid, is that you've got this content hub after. And we're seeing a lot of organizations, even if the event was free to attend, they're taking these events because these events are happening much more frequently, and they're bundling them together and they're creating like a master pass where people can basically have a membership, go back and access all this great content and community.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea to take the things that were already said and, repurpose that, bundle them together and make, tracks and courses and things that could be, sold throughout the year or years, and say like you can attend, the 2021 event for free, or you can pay $49 and get all of 2019 and 2020, 2019 and 2018 or whatever.
Right.
So where do you see this going in the future? What is 2021 going to be like for you guys?
Yeah, it's going to be an exciting year. Teams continuing to grow and to scale. We're on a product side. There's a lot of exciting things in the works there. And then we're also going to have the opportunity to really dig into this hybrid experience and think about how we can make that excellent for both the people who are there in person and those that are participating virtually. So it's going to be a really interesting year. I'm really excited to see what's to come. Certainly not going to sit here and make any predictions about when we might start to see more hybrid, but I can say that we have many organizations that have very full virtual calendars for the first half of the year. And I think the second half of the year, organizations are still a little up in the air in terms of what that's going to look like. But it's going to be a fun year.
Yeah, cool. So let me ask you a leadership / management type question. With your company growing, how have you seen that maybe your style or the way you manage and lead a team develop and change?
Yeah. So with the team growing so fast, I was wearing a lot of hats 8 months ago, and I'm wearing a lot less today. It's the hardest part has been the scenario where there's somebody who's super smart, super capable of making every decision they need to make, but they don't have access to all of the information. And I think in a sort of rapid scale hyper growth scenario, one of the hardest burdens is making sure that everybody has access to the same information that I have so that they can make those decisions on their own.
So have you seen it to be kind of challenging to delegate, or is it more just the communication and making sure, spending the time to get that information out?
I personally haven't found it challenging to delegate. I think that's a large part due to the fact that I just have such a high degree of trust for our team that it hasn't been one of those things where I'm worried about whatever decision they're going to make or execute on. It's just been a matter of, the scenarios where they might need some information that I'm the only one who has, and then we figure out how to make it so that I'm not the only one who has that information going forward.
Right. So maybe you're getting information in faster than you're able to get that back out.
Yeah, well, it's also 6 years of information I've accumulated.
Yeah, just that experience from being there. I get you.
Right.
All right. Well, cool. Well, how can people find out more about the things that you guys are doing, the way to host events, and learn more about your company and maybe connect with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find us on social. You can find us on online, accelevents.com. We actually just launched an awesome Facebook community. You can check that out as well and see how some other event organizers are implementing really creative styles for facilitating virtual events. And you can find me online as well on LinkedIn and Twitter, Jon Kazarian.
All right, John. I'll link all that up in the show notes, including your the Twitter, LinkedIn, the website, the Facebook page, and all people can find that at geekleader.com. Thanks so much for coming on the show and telling people about the things you guys are working on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, don't forget to check out merch. We have some t-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also, don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.